questions? No? Okay, good. Okay, so, right. So if you don't want one employee falsifying data for years, what can you do about it?
Job rotation.
Job rotation is one good answer. There are several others. Mandatory vacations, yeah. Separation of duties would work too. These are all controls because it is very common that one person starts doing a bad thing, and so there are many different controls to try to prevent that. All right, why do administrators need two accounts? That's right. You need one privileged and one unprivileged, but why?
Prevent privilege escalation.
Yeah, the point is, when you're doing things that do not require privileges, like surfing the web, you should not be using your privileged account, because that exposes its credentials to theft. Yeah?
Also, mention if like when the administrator walks away from their computer and the whole thing.
Yes, that's one of them. There's that, there's passing the hash, there's a variety of tricks. If you have a machine, in fact, what Microsoft said is you should never log into any machine as the domain administrator. You should just do run as and elevate to only one account, because otherwise, the hash of that password is stored on the local machine. People can steal it off of that local machine and get control of the domain. Yeah, there are many problems. You just shouldn't be throwing around high privilege credentials casually. All right. All right. So what's PII? Yep, that's it. Personally identifiable information, which is your name and one other thing tied to you, like your birthday or your address or something. All right, so what do you have to get in forensics before you turn off the computer?
RAM content.
The contents of RAM. There's other things. What's that?
Image.
Well, you get an image of the hard drive even after you power it off. That was the old rule. The old rule was kick out the plug and get an image of the hard drive, and that's all the evidence you get. But nowadays, people are more interested in live acquisition because they want the contents of RAM, which includes downloads in progress, network connections, and processes in memory. And they also want to capture the hard drive before you power it down in case it's encrypted. Because when you power it back up, you might not be able to get at that data on the hard drive. That's why, now what they do is, I've seen the cops have this thing, they wait for the perp to come home and start downloading stuff, and then they go pretend to be a UPS guy and wrestle them to the ground and get the machine logged in and in use. That's the way you really get the best evidence. Anyway, all right, so what do you attach to a forensic image so you can make sure it copies correctly?
A hash.
A hash. Attach to MD5 or SHA-1 or something like that.
Would hash prevent?
What's that?
It says, what does the question say?
What items do you add to the image to ensure that it can be copied without errors?
Does the hash prevent errors?
No, the hash lets you detect errors. So when you do copy it and you recalculate the hash, you know it's a perfect copy. That's the essential.
What does write blocker do? Is it?
A write blocker does not have anything to do with the image after you captured it. The write blocker, a write blocker means you can capture the image without altering the image during capture. All right, good. Any other questions?
Oh, not the second one. I thought it was the first one.
Yeah.
I saw in the literature where he didn't use his administrative account,
Yeah.
but he used an account with the most privileges right under that. Did I read that?
Well, I don't know that, but there was the system account, which is even more powerful than the administrator.
No, not
And in Windows 2000, there was something called a power user that was in between administrator and limited user, which turned out to be no good, and Microsoft got rid of it. But that was the only time they actually had this account that was not quite as powerful as an administrator. It turned out not to be much use. But this is Microsoft's early attempt to try to create an account that was safe enough to use on the web, but powerful enough to get your job done. And they finally gave up and had to switch to user account control, so you really are running with two different levels of privilege. Yeah.
So have you fiddled around with Windows 8 enough to know, like, with it being attached to your Hotmail? Like, I have an old legacy Hotmail,
Yeah.
and I have a new one with live.net,
Yeah.
whichever signed up through there. Anyway, my old legacy one is what it detects and logs me into Windows 8. So I should be going in there and messing with user accounts and setting up a new account.
Yes.
Because that's automatically making me the admin, even though it's like tied into like Hotmail as registered.
No, I don't think it'll make you the admin of your local system. What it'll do is it'll need you to be synchronized over the cloud. That's the idea. So all your Windows 8 machines will automatically synchronize your desktop and email and favorites and such. That's the idea of that.
how should I protect myself? I mean, I'm logging in as an administrator technically, right?
No, I don't think so. I think it still has user account control. Try doing something that takes administrative privileges. Right-click computer and go to manage, and then you should see a user account prompt, just like Windows 7 in there.
Oh, yeah, that pops up.
Yeah, so then you're not really running as administrator. That's the point.
Okay.
Yeah. But one account will do for Windows 7 and Windows 8 because your one account has two different privilege levels. Although it's not as safe as having two separate accounts, and that's why server administrators really need two separate accounts, because both those accounts have the same password. And therefore, it's really not a good practice to use, but it's good enough for clients typically, because normal users don't want to try to remember two passwords.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Is there a question over this one? Well, all right, let's do some practice questions. Come grab an iClicker if you don't have one. So I went online to get more practice questions, and I found this book, which seemed to be pretty good. Security Plus Practice Exams, and you can take a look. You might want to get it yourself. So, what do you do to secure the network on a network switch? All right, looks like I got 16 responders. So, all these make no sense except the first one. Disable unused ports. That's a good idea. Yep. Now, somebody liked C. Let's take a look at C. C was RC4. Well, RC4 is part of web. But you don't use the wired networks, and this sounds like a wired switch. Right, so here, they want you to put secure cabling on their military device. So what kind of cable is the most secure? And fiber is considered more secure because it doesn't leak any data out, and it's very hard to cut into and splice, and so it's as the cable itself is more resistant to tampering and snooping. Any kind of cable with a wire, you can just pick a loop around the outside and get the emitted radio and detect what the signal inside there, although the shielded twisted pair resists that to some extent. It's not perfect, but fiber is very good. You can, by the way, eavesdrop on a fiber connection, but it is quite tricky. You have to very carefully strip away all the plastic and then bend the fiber through an angle and get the part that leaks out. You often break it doing that. It's quite difficult compared to breaking into a wired cable. Yeah?
Where's the multi-mode?
Oh, there's two kinds of fiber. One of them is the multi-mode fiber has a 50 micron core so that the light goes through at 100 different angles, which causes the light to smear out temporarily, and it has less bandwidth, but it's cheaper to use because you can use light emitting diodes to make the light. Single mode fiber is a 9 micron core, so it only lets one path of light go through it, and it's much more precise, but you have to pay more money for the lasers at both ends to send and receive it. Good. Yeah, there's just two kinds of fiber, single mode and multi-mode. And multi-mode is cheaper, but doesn't go as far or as fast. All right, well, it's cheaper to use. They're both, the fiber costs the same, but the equipment at both ends costs about 10 times as much for single mode. Well, let's try this number 6. Looks like it has at least one answer. All right, using a protocol analyzer, she finds ICMP traffic, and she's afraid it is some kind of attack involving the VoIP. So what would you tell her? All right. And so ping and trace route use ICMP at least under Windows. So that's not necessarily a problem. That's the only statement here that makes any sense. How about that? Number 10. What kind of address is that? FE80 and all that hogwash. And yes, you hear enough about this from me anyway. IP version 6, of course. Let's try 14. You want to store a file, and you don't want any username or password. Which protocol gives you that option? All right, they're describing TFTP, Trivial File Transfer Protocol, which is commonly used for that purpose. Oh my goodness, all over the place. But that's what's commonly used for router configuration files and smartphone configuration files. There's a TFTP server, no username or password. You just connect and download a file. It is traditionally used for router configuration files. I don't really know why. Let's see. All right, how about this one, number 2? They want to control access to a file to limit unauthorized modifications. So what are they trying to accomplish? All right, and that is integrity, to make sure that things are not getting modified inappropriately. Yeah?
Would it also be a confidentiality if employees don't have access to it?
Yeah, so I think it's
No, confidentiality is preventing unauthorized people from reading it, and here that's not what they're worried about. They're worried about unauthorized people writing to it. So they're quite different.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's still a little confusing
Yeah.
because unauthorized, it feels like unauthorized access to the file, and then if you have access to the file, you can read or write or
No,
something.
and in fact, if you take the CISSP, they go into this, it's very important. For example, the very first model in CISSP was Bell La Pudala, and this thing was intended to protect confidentiality. So they made it so you can't read anything at a higher security level, and you can't write anything to a lower security level because you might be revealing secrets. And what happened is you could write up. So you could alter secrets that you can't read. This is the case. You can have write without read. Just like, read without write.
Yeah, that's true.
And it's very important in the world of security. It happens and leads to strange consequences. So this is, by the way, reflective of a real truth in the world, which is that if you keep secrets well, you lose control of what your people are doing. And they start being inefficient. They can't talk to each other, and they can't all read the commands from up top, so they start duplicating work, contradicting each other, undoing each other's work. This is what happens when you have too many secrets.
So the concept of confidentiality is about reading,
Yes.
not about...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Confidentiality means only authorized people can read stuff. Integrity means only authorized people can write stuff.
And that's kind of separate from the requiring authentication to do either.
They both require authentication because you have to decide if they're authorized. So you have to decide who somebody is, and then you have to decide what they're allowed to do. This is like what is Bruce Schneider's problem with the TSA. He said the TSA makes me show them an ID card before I get on the airplane. I don't care who these people are. I just want to know if they have a bomb. I don't really care who they are. That's not the point. Anyway, so it's very strange to focus on finding out who they are. That's not the issue. All right, good. So how about number 4 here? Somebody has a website, and I'm going to give you a tool that gives you full administrative rights to a remote computer. So what are you going to call that? All right, and that's an exploit. Somebody takes advantage of a vulnerability to do something you don't want to happen. That's an exploit. The rest of these are not. Okay, you're going to install 2 email servers in a cluster. What is the point of that? Anyway, that's availability. It's a high availability solution to have redundant systems. All right, let's try 15 here. You're going to use a protocol analyzer, and you're going to see the contents of transmissions. So what principle have you violated? And they have violated confidentiality there. You're seeing things that you're not authorized to see. So your network is poorly configured. People are throwing things around in plain text that should be confidential. Okay, your company restricts firewall administrators from modifying the logs. What's that an example of? All right, and that's separation of duties. Instead of letting the firewall administrator do everything, the firewall is put in pieces, which is very good. The first person can change rules, and the second person is the only one that can erase the logs. So neither one of them can do a bad thing and cover it up.
Could that also be least privilege?
No, not really, because
They're only allowed to do it.
well, if you have implemented privilege rules to enforce it, then you could argue it is. But what they're referring to here most directly is separation of duties. They don't see how this is implemented. For example, when I read this question, I got the feeling that there's actually nothing to prevent the firewall administrator from deleting the logs except they're told not to. So you don't know if they've actually implemented least privilege or if they've just been given an order to do this. Only IT security personnel are allowed.
So most likely it was just an order somebody told.
Yeah, it could just be an order, but it would be a lot better if it was backed up with a technical control, in my opinion, like they don't have the ability to write to those. Looks like 8 fits on the page. We got a second-hand router. Okay. All right, and that's data remnants. They have forgotten secure equipment disposal. Everybody sees that, I suppose. It's not like there's a secret in the config. It's just unprofessional to let the next guy see your config. There's one you should know, 13. What's a newly discovered exploit with no remedy? All right, that's a 0 day. These seem like they're about the right level, and I haven't seen any that were wrong yet. Oh, okay, this will do. Number 1, the MAC address has changed. What kind of attack is going on here? All right, that means it's ARP poisoning. ARP poisoning is when you change the MAC addresses. So traffic is redirected at layer 2 to go to the wrong place. Let's do number 2. Looks like it fits on the page. You're going to try to limit tailgating. Did you pick one?
Yeah.
Okay. You don't sound too happy about it. The only one any good there is man trap. Most people got it right. Yeah, the tailgating is following somebody through a door. So the general controls are a man trap or those turnstiles like they have at BART, which totally don't work. But anyway, they would if the guard actually paid any attention. So, a buffer overflow attack. Sure, let's do number 3 here. This looks pretty good. All right, the buffer overflow is sending too much data. See, yeah, we got that. Good. You folks know your attacks. Attacks are the fun part, of course. Yes, right. Might as well do number 4 too. That's enough of these. So, somebody's logging in with this name and that password. So what are they trying to do? All right. That is SQL injection. The joy of SQL injection. Okay, good. So, all right, Janet has visited a site with infected flash code. Now she has pop-ups. Where's the problem? I think that's a worm. I don't think it's, well, it's not cross-site script, because that doesn't work through Flash, and only works while you're on the site. See, if your machine has been infected by a worm, see, I don't think you'd call it adware, because that is stuff you have agreed to put on your machine. They can do inside there. That's when you install something like a security product, and it comes with extra junk attached, which you agreed to, which is technically not hidden. This is a worm, something that infects you when you didn't need to. It comes drive-by download that just goes without you willingly installing something and signing an agreement. It's a worm. This is why my machine got infected, because adware is not blocked by Sophos because it's technically not an exploit. It's something you agreed to put on the machine. Yeah.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that this is actually like progressing through the network. It could be just on her machine.
No, it came from this flash code from website. So it was a drive-by download. They're telling me that. So it did come over the network onto her machine when she visited a website with a flash. Yeah.
Well, it still classifies adware as the most common form of pop-up, or the most common form is pop-ups.
It is. Adware is one way to cause pop-ups. Let's see what's the detailed answer to this one? Well, these guys like adware. They don't like B because worms are self-replicating code. All right, fine, I'll settle.
Yeah, worm doesn't really do.
This part sounds like adware, and this part sounds like the worm. So, all right, I'm not going to grade that one, I think.